Now, it's pretty rare that an author finishes a trilogy so well and then announces that they're doing a second trilogy and that it holds a candle to the original. I've seen it too many times where the second trilogy falls short or takes away from the original. I'm happy to say, though, that did not happen here. And of course, I'm talking about Iron Gold by Pierce Brown. So Iron Gold takes place a decade after the conclusion of Morningstar, which was book 3 of the original Red Rising trilogy, and I absolutely loved the first trilogy. Hands down, spoiler alert, I haven't read much sci-fi, but it's my favorite sci-fi series that I've read. Golden Sun and Morningstar, books 2 and 3 of that trilogy were just so fantastic. The character work, the world building, everything about those books really made me fall in love with this world and grow very attached to these characters. And to do a time jump is always risky because I've seen it done poorly, which in my opinion was Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn Era 1 versus Era 2. Now that time jump was way more significant than it is here. This is only a decade that was hundreds of years into the future, but oftentimes I hear about or I see, authors are hesitant to come back to the world and just continue the story. They want something fresh, they want something new, and that's either a time jump and or new characters, and Iron Gold does a little bit of both. So this being 10 years into the future, obviously there will be just spoiler alert for some of the things that happened in the original trilogy. If you have not read those other 3 books, you probably don't want to watch a review for Iron Gold. I'm going to keep this spoiler free for Iron Gold, but of course to set up where this story takes place, it is going to spoil the ending of Morningstar, so please turn away if you have not read that book and come back after you have. So before I get into any plot points or what the story is about, what's interesting is the entire first trilogy was first person POV. Darrow was your main protagonist. He's the entire story. You follow him, you see everything through his eyes. And what Pierce Brown did in this book is he kept the first person narration, but he split it into 4 different POVs, which is super interesting. So you have Darrow, of course, is still your main character, but you also have 3 other POVs. You have the character of Lysander, you have the character of Lyria, and you have the character of Ephraim. For what happened in Morningstar, Darrow and his Howlers and the Rising succeeded. They overthrew the society, they overthrew the Sovereign. The way that story ended and why Lysander is now a POV chapter is Cassius took him under his wing for the last 10 years. They kind of pieced out. Instead of killing Lysander, even though Severo wanted to, Darrow and them convinced them, just let him and Cassius leave. They don't have to be part of this. They're not going to come back to hurt us later. Just let them be in peace. So now Lysander is 20 years old. He's been out about, doing random things with Cassius, trying to be kind of saviors to some people that they come across. They just try to help out wherever they can, right? So Lysander is one of our main POV chapters. We of course follow Darrow, who is now dealing with being a father. As we learned at the end of Morningstar, he has a son now with Mustang, and his name is Pax. So they're raising a kid. Mustang is actually the Sovereign, so she is running society now, and they installed essentially a democracy, and they have the Senate. They listen to everybody around them. They kind of stripped away all the power of the Sovereign, basically. So she really relies on coordinating and negotiating with others around them to keep this whole thing afloat. And Darrow is really struggling with his inner battle of leaving war behind and being a father to his son and being a husband to his wife, while also being the Reaper, which is kind of his DNA at this point. Like, he was bred for war. He is a warrior, he is a killer, and it's almost like he can't fight against it, and he just has to let that out. So that's his entire struggle in this story. Really revolves around wanting to be home with his family and getting away from the fighting, but also knowing inside that he can't. We also meet Lyria, and she is from Mars. She is basically introduced as a character that dislikes this entire new society. Not that she enjoyed the previous one, but they were given all these promises. You actually see part of this. Mustang, as the Sovereign, has all these hollow holotapes are, you know, broadcasting across the HC so that everybody can see it, saying, you know, come up out of the mines, we'll protect you, we'll keep you safe, like this is the new society, things are different. And Lyria's story takes place basically 2 years after that message reaching her, and life has been hell for her. She's in essentially an internment camp. They're all huddled together in crappy living conditions. Life is not better at all. There's this group called the Red Hand running across Mars, just kind of pillaging and killing whoever they come across. So that's where her story starts out, and she has a clear dislike, to say the least, of the Sovereign, the Reaper, and this new, you know, establishment that's in place. Now we also follow Ephraim, who is a Grey. He, I don't really think it's a spoiler. When they introduce this character, you learn that he was the husband to Trig, who you just met briefly in Morning Star before he was killed, rescuing Darrow. So he is actually Holiday's brother-in-law, and you don't know too much about him. He's kind of a thief, just, you know, getting by stealing things, you know, taking on these different various contracts. And Holiday is kind of disappointed in him because I guess when Trig died, he just kind of, you know, said, you know, F this, and kind of devolved into thievery. Basically what this does by splitting into these 4 POV chapters, and usually it's 1 to 3 at a time of like Darrow, then Ephraim, then Lyria, then Lysander. So you'll get, you know, 10 to 15 pages of Darrow, and then, you know, 20 pages of Lyria, etc., etc. It really expands the world building in this book a lot, to where you're not just focused on Darrow anymore. Like, this world has grown way beyond Darrow, way beyond the Rising. You know, you're feeling the ramifications of what they left in the wake of all this war and destruction. You're learning what Lyria and other, you know, Martians have to go through. You really get a feel for what these other characters are going through, and what, you know, smaller people in this society are actually dealing with on a day-to-day basis because of what Darrow and the Rising did to the world. Not that before was any better. The Sovereign was a tyrant. They killed it on a whim. They had a caste system. So, I mean, that's not entirely gone here, because you do still have leaders, but they're working very hard to, you know, unite golds, obsidians, grays, blues, etc., and kind of wash away the previous structure. Of course, though, you do have those that wish it were the way of the past. And you have a lot of golds that are still very angry that they're not in charge anymore. The two, I guess, other factions that are intertwined in this story are the Ash Lord, who you really only know very little about based on the ending of Morning Star. You know that he's still alive and is going to be wanting revenge against the Rising, because you saw that he was buddy-buddy with the Sovereign when they fell. And you, of course, have the Rim. And the Moon Lords out on the Rim, you know they left off with Romulus at the head, kind of with an understanding of Darrow, like, I know you blew up our docks so that we couldn't retaliate, but we'll keep the peace. Like, neither of us are allowed in each other's airspace, and if either of us cross that zone, it's war. So you're dealing with, you know, are they going to attack us at some point? You're dealing with, okay, the Ash Lord is over there, but, you know, as long as he lives, we're probably always going to be at war. And that's really where Darrow's story kind of goes, and that's his internal struggle, just knowing that the Ash Lord is out there and that they have an army and that they're never truly safe until everybody's conquered. So that's Darrow's kind of struggle of, man, like, I feel like crap. I haven't seen my kid, you know, as much as I should, but I'm also the Reaper. Like, I need to be the Reaper. But once again, I love Pierce Brown's character work. Darrow has just been through so, I mean, honestly, all these characters have been through so much in this trilogy, and now in book 4. But, you know, them being in their early to mid-30s now, they're much different people than when we met them. You know, they were 16, 17 years old in book 1 of Red Rising. And now I think Darrow's like 33, Severo, Mustang. I mean, everybody is in their 30s. They all have families. They have kids. They have different priorities now. And, you know, most of them have been bred to be nothing but warriors. So you really get to see a good look of, you know, how you cope with being that, but also being so much more now that you have a family to worry about, or you have a society to worry about. Like, they're actually running things, and they're really realizing that it's not, you can't just overthrow society, and then, you know, oh, caste system's gone, we're good, like everybody's free now. It just doesn't work that way. And they're really discovering that it's a lot harder to run things than they probably ever thought. Something else that I personally enjoy a lot is just how much darker these books are getting. Where Red Rising kind of started out, it was a little bit more... it was violent, but you kind of understood the violence because it circled around, you know, the tournament that they were put into. And with every single book in this series, the world gets darker and darker, and you learn more about how things were established, why the colors are the way that they are, why people are treated the way that they are, and you really understand like why the society existed as it did. And now that that's overthrown, of course there's power vacuums. You have, you know, different factions vying for power, whether that be through politics or war. You still have a lot of terrible people trying to consolidate power, kidnapping people, killing people. You know, this whole world is violent. A lot of characters are very, very gray. None of them are really guys. I mean, even the good guys that we follow, like, they killed innocent people. I mean, no one in this story doesn't have blood on their hands, and everyone's kind of terrible to a degree. And I love that, though, because it makes the character so dynamic. No one's just, you know, always right or always wrong. Even the villains, they're not, you know, mustache twirling villains. They have reasons to hate Darrow, or, you know, hate Severo, or hate what has happened because it took everything away from them. And even the characters that aren't necessarily villains, like their anger, their hatred towards this whole situation is justified because, you know, they were kind of innocent to the whole world and they just had everything taken from them. So you really feel for these characters and you totally get what they're going through. And I think Pierce Brown just did such a fantastic job of making all these characters engaging. All their stories are interesting. It's rare that I come across a character that I don't like the way that they were written, because while there are characters in this story that I hate, there are certain people that I want dead in this world of Red Rising, but that's not for a lack of character work. That is because they're done so well and their decisions piss me off, and it makes you worry for other characters and their future, that it's kind of like a you love to hate them kind of thing, because every time you read about them it's just like, ugh. All in all, though, this was just such a good jumping off point from the ending of the original trilogy, which I honestly think Morning Star could have been the end, and I would have been 100% satisfied with the ending of the story. I wouldn't need anything else. But now reading Iron Gold and seeing where Pierce Brown is taking this story, and he did such a good job of continuing it, I'm happy that I've read it, and I'm itching to get into Dark Age. Having said that, book 6 probably not coming out till next year, so if I burn through that one, I'm probably going to drive myself crazy waiting for a year to get to book 6 whenever that comes out. So I might actually hold off and take a little bit of a slower pace with Dark Age and really, you know, soak it all in, because because I've just come back to reading, all these series that I've been reading have been completed for years, so I can just go book 1, 2, 3, cool, book 1, 2, 3, cool. And now that this is, you know, 4 or 5 and then 6, and 6 isn't out yet, I'm going to start to get to that point where I'm catching up to these stories, and then I'm going to have to be with everybody else in the waiting room, just itching, you know, for these books to come out. So, all in all, I love this entire series so far. Iron Gold, I definitely didn't like quite as much as Golden Sun or Morning Star, but I think it's not anything to do with the characters or where the story's going. But again, it's the first book of a trilogy now, so I think it was a little bit of a slower burn. And because it's the first book of the series where you're jumping from POV to POV, it almost has to do that, because you're building up the characters of Lyria and Ephraim and Lysander while continuing Darrow's story. I mean, if this was 600 pages of just Darrow, it probably would have been a non-stop, relentless action sci-fi bonanza that Golden Sun or even the, you know, the last third of Morning Star were. And I'm anticipating that Dark Age will do that, because one, Dark Age is, how freaking big is this book? For one thing, Dark Age is damn near 800 pages long. So when I get to that, that's going to be crazy. But since you'll have already been introduced to these characters and what happens in this book, I have a feeling that Dark Age is going to be a lot more, full throttle, full speed ahead with the action, as the previous books were. So I'm really looking forward to that. But please, Pierce Brown, just don't kill my favorite characters. Okay, like, the world's dark and full of terrors, and I don't want my boys to die. So just don't do that to me, okay? But I think that'll wrap up this spoiler-free review for Iron Gold. I liked it a lot. Looking forward to where Dark Age takes this story. And as soon as book 6 comes out, I'll be there day one reading it, because I want to see how this ends. And if that will actually be the end, or if he's going to continue it after that, I have no idea. But stick around definitely for a Dark Age review. Probably going to be a little bit later, maybe a couple weeks, just because, like I said, I'm going to take my time with that one. It's a pretty big book. And I'm actually reading Malice by John Gwynne right now as well, so I'll probably step back a little bit from Dark Age and then come back to that in a couple of weeks. But until next time, everybody, keep reading.